Hey everybody, it's Mr. G. Welcome back to Just Corvette Crazy. In this video today, what we're going to be doing is part 2 of the no start scenario for the C4 Corvette. This process can be used as a guideline for any other vehicle. It just happens to be that I was focusing on the C4 Corvette. There are 4 things that are required by any engine in order to start. We must have fuel, compression, voltage or electricity, and spark. Compression we're going to assume that we have, because compression just doesn't go away instantly. So we're going to be focusing on the 3 other situations: fuel, electricity, and spark. In the first video, I showed you how to test for each of those and the processes that you go through. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you a flowchart scenario that you can use with your measurements to pinpoint or at least narrow down the possibilities of where your problem lies. So, stay tuned.
Hey folks, this is Mr. G and welcome to Just Corvette Crazy. On this channel we talk about Corvettes, we fix some Corvettes, and we love to drive our Corvettes. So if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out a lot. Thanks.
Alright, the first things we're going to be looking at are looking for a problem with VATs. So that's the Vehicle Anti-Theft System that's available in the C4 and the C5 Corvettes. And also the voltage test that we're going to be performing. So in video number 1, you can find the VATs information starting at 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the video. And for the voltage test starts somewhere around 5 minutes and 50 seconds into the video. So let's take a look. When you get into the car, you put your key in and you go to start the car. Does the engine click or turn over? So do you hear a clicking noise coming from the starter, or does the engine actually turn over? So do you hear it trying to start? If the answer is yes, then you have no problem with your VATs. If you get in the car and you put your key in to start and you do not hear a click, you do not hear the engine turn over, take a look for your security light. If your security light is working properly, the security light will come on and it'll stay on. If the security light comes on and stays on, then you've got a problem with your VATs system. So in the video I talked about a couple of solutions, one being cleaning the key and the ignition cylinder, and then the second is the VATs bypass. One thing you must keep in mind is once the car detects a VATs failure and your security light lights up, it will lock you out for 10 minutes. So that means even though you clean the key and do whatever, you have to wait 10 minutes for the error to clear itself before you can try and start the car. So keep that in the back of your mind. If the security light does not come on and stay on, what you want to look at is a possibility of a battery issue that's causing your no start. So what you want to do is you measure your battery voltage. So you take your voltmeter and you measure your battery voltage. Is the battery voltage less than 10 volts? So with the battery sitting there under no load situation, is the battery less than 10 volts? If the answer is yes, then you've got a battery issue. Charge that battery. Possibility your battery needs to be replaced. Do you have normal voltage on the battery? So that means, is it greater than 10 volts? So is the voltage below 10? The answer is no. What you want to do is you want to check the voltage at the car, and I showed you how to do this. So not right on the battery, at the car. When you do that, is your voltage the same as what you had in this test? If it is, then you've got a possible problem with your starter or the starter solenoid. If you read a battery voltage here, let's say an example 12 volts here, and then when you do it on the car away from the battery, so from the alternator terminal to your brake line, if there's a difference between these two voltages when you try and start the car, then that normally signifies that you have some kind of a bad connection from your battery to the car. And the most common is bad terminals on the battery or a bad ground connector to the chassis. So if these values are different, so if this one says 12 volts and this one says 10 volts, then somewhere you are losing voltage going from the battery to the car. So check your connectors. So check the terminal connectors on the battery, make sure they're nice and clean, and then check your ground wires. So I hope that helps in the first scenario. Next, we're going to be looking for spark. So if you go to the video number 1, you'll see the spark testing starting somewhere around 10 minutes and 37 seconds into the video. So what you want to do is you want to connect your spark plug or your spark tester to the car like I showed you in the video, and you're going to try and start the car. When you do so, do you see spark? If you do see spark, then spark is not your issue. That's the end of this test. If you do not see spark, then what you want to do is you want to measure the voltage at the distributor going to the coil with the key in the on or run position. So what you're trying to do is make sure that your battery voltage is making it to the distributor. So I show you how to do that in the video. Do you have a voltage at the coil? If not, check your fuses for your ignition system. So that means that there's no voltage getting to the coil. If you do have voltage at the coil, when you turn the engine over, listen to the injectors. Are the injectors clicking and firing while you are turning over the engine? So even though there's no spark, are you still getting the injectors to fire? So are the injectors firing? If not, there's a possible problem with your ECU. If your injectors are firing, you can hear them clicking as you're starting the car. If you can hear them clicking, then most likely your problem is somewhere in the distributor. So in the distributor, there are 5 parts that make up the distributor in a C4 L98 Corvette. You've got the cap, rotor, you've got the coil, you got a magnetic pickup, and you have the ignition control module. So, if you have voltage at the coil and the injectors are firing, look for the problem in the distributor. If the injectors are not firing, look for a problem in the ECU. Because the ECU controls when the injectors are firing and the fuel pump and everything that goes along with the ignition. So you could have a massive failure in the ECU causing no spark. But if your injectors are firing, then we can assume that your ECU is good and the problem lies elsewhere. Again, cap, rotor, coil, magnetic pickup, or the ignition control module. So I hope that helps you with this particular scenario. All right, now we're going to be testing for fuel. In the part 1 of the video, you'll find the fuel test starting at 17 minutes 48 seconds. So what you're going to do is you're going to connect your fuel gauge, so the fuel gauge, fuel pressure tester, to the fuel rail and turn the key to the run position. So again, connect the fuel pressure gauge to the fuel rail through the Schrader valve. I show you where that is in the car in the L98. And then you're going to put your key into the run position. Do you get fuel pressure? If the answer is yes, then the assumption can be made that your fuel pump and your fuel pump relay are working. Once you have that working, try to start the car. So for 2 seconds when you put the key into the run, the fuel pump should prime the fuel rails and fill them with pressure so that you can start the car. So try starting the car. When you try starting the car, does the fuel pressure remain or does it die off? If the fuel pressure does not remain, so that means the fuel pressure dies, there's a possibility of the oil pressure sensor or the ECU as a problem. So once the car is primed and ready to go and you try to start the car, it's the ECU that controls the fuel pump, not the relay anymore. The ECU controls the fuel pump. The ECU gets a signal from your oil pressure sensor. If your oil pressure sensor does not send a signal saying that you have a minimum of 4 pounds of oil pressure, the car will not start. So if we have no fuel pressure when we're trying to start the car, the ECU is what controls the fuel pump at that point. And if we have no pressure, the ECU has not turned on the pump. Your oil pressure sensor tells the ECU it's safe to turn on the pump. So you're going to look at a problem in the oil pressure sensor, possibly even your oil pump itself, or the ECU. Does the fuel pressure remain when you try and start the car? Yes. So then what you want to do is you want to do another test. You want to spray some starter fluid into the throttle body. So pull the snorkel off the throttle body, spray some starter fluid down there, and try and start the car. Does the engine fire at all? So once you spray some starter fluid in there, and it's best to have a friend do it, spray, and one person spray while the other person tries to start the car. Does the engine fire at all? If not, then your fuel system is not the problem. So you have pressure all the way through, and you're forcing some fluid into the intake, and it's still not firing, then your fuel system is not the issue. Does the engine fire even for an instant? Yes, it does. What's happening at this point is there's fuel in the fuel rails, but it's not making it into the engine. So again, when you're trying to start, listen for the injectors. Are the injectors firing? If the injectors are not firing, there are fuses that control the injectors. There's also a history of problems with the grounding connection on the injectors. But it could also mean that you have an ECU issue as well. So again, does the engine fire? Yes. That means that fuel is making it into the rails but not making it into the engine. Are the injectors firing? Yes. So if the injectors are actually clicking, it's a possibility if the car has been sitting for a long period of time that your injectors are clogged. Now this will not happen overnight. So if you park your car Friday night, get up Saturday morning, and it will not start, this is not going to be your issue. So if you are parking your car or have purchased a vehicle that hasn't run in a long time, then it's a possibility that your injectors could be clogged. So let's go back up. Connect your fuel gauge to the fuel rail, turn the key to the run position. Do you have fuel pressure? If you do not have fuel pressure, try to start the car, and try and start the car for 10 seconds. So have the engine turning over for 10 seconds and watch your gauge. Do you build up fuel pressure? If you do not, then that means you've got a bad fuel pump. So that means there's no fuel pump being activated to build up pressure to prime the system, and none for running. So chances are you've got a fuel pump issue. Now the other possibility, again, if your car's been sitting for a really, really long time, there's a possibility that you could have a clogged fuel filter. But again, that doesn't happen overnight. Do you build fuel pressure? So try starting the car for 10 seconds. Do you build fuel pressure? If the answer is yes, then you continue with the other scenario. So do you build fuel pressure? Yes. Then go ahead and spray the starter fluid into the throttle body and try and start the car. Does the engine fire? No. Then your fuel system has no issue. Does the engine fire even for a second? Yes, it does. Then again, you have fuel in the rails, but it's not making it into the engine. Listen for the injectors firing, and it'll lead to clogged injectors or possible fuse or ECU issue. Well, I hope this gives you an idea of what might be the cause for your engine to not start. Again, I will put the link above, and I will put it down in the comment section for the first video in this series that shows you how to perform the measurements and to test for things like voltage and spark and fuel pressure. I hope this helps. I hope this gets you out of a difficult situation. Please subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more to come. Until next time, everybody stay safe. Take care.